Something that caused quite a lot of debate this week was the pass mark for NSFAS students. First, the pot was stirred by a local newspaper saying that students receiving government loans under the NSFAS regime would have to get a pass mark of 75%. Well, this was quickly then clarified by NSFAS, saying what they had proposed was that students pass 75% of their modules they sign up for. Let's get this debate going now and discuss the matters that are confronting students at our tertiary institutions. And I'm joined in studio by Mandla Shigwambana. He is the EFF Student Command President. And we also have Sizopila Mkize. She is with the ANC Youth League National Task Team, and she's a spokesperson there. We also joined via the virtual platform by Sakile Mgadi, who is the Federal Deputy Chairperson of the DA's student organization. To all of you, thank you very much for making the time. Let's first pick up on this confusion that was created this week, and I'll start with the lady to my right. Sizopila, when you heard that, and it's something that, of course, we shouldn't focus the attention on because NSFAS has since clarified that 75% of the modules ought to be passed for students to continue enjoying the assistance of NSFAS. But on the face of it, what is the situation that confronts students when it comes to NSFAS funding?
Look, I do not care really about the clarification that NSFAS has given. Even the clarification itself, it's nonsensical, because it means when you're doing like 10 modules, you must pass about, there's no 7.5, I mean, there's no 75%. So it means you must pass at least 8 of them. And I do not understand how does NSFAS decides that a pass mark should be 75% of all modules when a student is still admitted in school, because rightfully so, the student still qualifies to be admitted in school. Now, this is just a way for NSFAS to exclude more people, and students are not the same. The conditions in which they study under are not the same. You can't compare a student of VETS and the conditions they study under with a student of Mangosuthu University of Technology, for instance. Yeah. So I do not believe that it's a fair proposal. It's just a way of NSFAS to exclude more, especially more young black students who are really getting assistance from NSFAS. Yeah. I think they just want to continue either with their corruption or they just want to exclude young people who are black for the fun of it.
Mr. Shigwambana, your thoughts on students needing to pass 75% of their modules? Remember, there's been a correction. It's not 75% that's needed, yeah. 75% of modules that one is studying for you to qualify for NSFAS funding.
Look, as a student's command, we find it very difficult to understand how this NSFAS is actually operating. I mean, you'll agree with me that students in their institutions, they are facing a number of issues beside us speaking about the number of modules that they are doing and what they should actually acquire in terms of percentage for them to be given this funding of theirs. NSFAS, it has many issues around allowances of students. First, NSFAS, they take time to disperse allowances in terms of food allowances, book allowances, and also even the rental allowances. They delay. And then in that process, when you delay disbursement of book allowances, what are you actually saying? What the students are going to use for them to be able to get this 75% that which they are saying they are actually requiring from the students? Because you are not giving them early study materials that they should be using for them to go to class and get the 75% which they are using. So I'm sitting here looking at NSFAS as to say, NSFAS, they are running under a serious financial crisis because of their corrupt activities, first, also because of their incompetency, also because of what? Maladministrations that which they are having in their institution as NSFAS as it is. And when they seated around the table amongst themselves, they said, what is the contingency plan of us at least getting enough money to fund the students? Then they said to themselves, rather we increase the modules that the students need to pass from 50 to what? to 75.
Yeah.
Then it will reduce the number of what? People that we are going to do what? To fund, so that we are able, I mean, it's like they are trying to bring out a plan on how to run their own finances while they're actually robbing black students of their rights of going to what? To, to class and also get or acquire this education. So we are saying as the EFF Students Command, this NSFAS, whatever proposal that which they are bringing on table, we are actually not approving it. And we are going to fight, and we're going to make sure that we protect our students.
We're going to come to the exact demands that you are making. Let's get a sense from Sakile Mngadi, who is from the Democratic Alliance Student Organization. Mr. Mngadi, thanks for your time. What is your organization's position on this matter?
Thank you for having us, and a good day to the viewers. So I think, Mandla touches on it briefly when he speaks about some of the structural challenges that NSFAS faces. And these are structural challenges that have been sort of chronic to the institution. And so a policy that they propose that seeks to, sort of change the playing field, increase the standards expected of students, shouldn't just be put forth, haphazardly without the consideration of the current environment that even NSFAS contributes to by lack of providing, the basic necessities that make environments conducive for higher education to take place. And so when Mandla speaks about things like, allowances being paid late, students not having food, not having accommodation, all of those are, structural things and problems that NSFAS needs to sort out before we can begin to entertain an idea of, how students perform within, the higher learning or higher education sector. And so, rightfully so, I think that there are a lot of structural challenges that NSFAS faces that are problematic and that have a direct bearing on how students eventually, perform year on out. However, I tend to disagree with my colleague from the ANC Youth League in saying that 75% as an idea or, on principle is something bad, because I don't think, trying to argue for excellence, particularly in higher education, is necessarily a bad thing. I think there's merit there. I think particularly what we believe as the DA Students Organization is that there are structural challenges at play currently still within NSFAS as an institution that have a direct bearing on the performance of students. And these structural challenges need to be addressed before we can start entertaining what we need to expect from students, because at the end of the day, a student who's hungry, who doesn't have accommodation, whose allowances are paid late, cannot perform at a level that is satisfactory, and obviously then might be excluded academically as a result of passing this policy. So it's not a black and white issue of whether or not we should support it or not. I think a policy like this has, with the challenges that students face daily and their lived experiences daily, that need to be addressed before we can support it.
All right. Thank you very much for your thoughts there, Sakile Mngadi. Sizopila Mkhize, let's come to you. And I want to pick up exactly from where Sakile says arguing for excellence cannot be a bad thing. Can I go further and say that surely for someone who is being funded, this is almost like a bursary.
Almost.
You ought to perform at your best, because you're not doing this for government, which is assisting you. You're doing this for your own personal development. So it cannot come across as entitlement.
Look, number one, I think we need to understand why was the NSFAS in the first place. Why did we need NSFAS in the first place? And like my colleague Mandla has said, that there are conditions in which students are faced with which do not allow students to be able to perform in the way that they should be performing. I mean, we're not necessarily saying we're not advocating for excellency. That is what we're advocating. We do advocate for excellency, but we are saying 75% is a bit too much to ask from a student who studies in a university and gets the book allowance delayed, gets the food allowance delayed. Basically, you have stress that you might be kicked out of the place where you're renting, and at the same time, you're expected to give your best in your studies. It is quite too much to ask for. We can ask it we can ask it from our members that you must excel, but it can't be a thing that NSFAS uses for it to exclude students. It can't be that. It can't be right that I will have a problem. For instance, I'll have a problem that I don't have books to use for my modules. All 8 of them. I don't have books because there is a delay in NSFAS providing that. I think what must happen here, Oli, is that NSFAS board, whatever it is, including the Department of Higher Education, they need to sit down and admit that NSFAS is not really doing what it is supposed to do. There is a lot of corruption that is happening in NSFAS, and it is not taken head on. I mean, we argued. I think it was, I can't remember the year, the fees must fall. 50. We argued with all student organizations to say what is going to help us here is free education. But what is happening is that they keep on giving us this NSFAS, which does not really help. I mean, for instance, let me take you a bit back. NSFAS says we can't fund a person who their father is a policeman, or how much does a policeman earn? You cannot be able, our parents have to go out to make loans. The government is not helping. The government is not helping. NSFAS is not helping. They just want to run and take their hands to the cookie jar as fast as they can.
At the risk of turning this almost into a political war targeted at the Minister of Higher Education, Blade Nzimande, someone listening to you saying, but you are clad in ANC regalia. This is your comrade that obviously stands in the way of students accessing the much-needed funding. Have you raised this sharply within ANC structures?
For God knows how long, Oli, we've had so many marches. And for one reason or the other, Blade is just either untouchable or refuse to be touched. Whatever happens when he has to be removed. I mean, we have been marching with SASCO, with YCLSA, with courses, with the ANC. Like, we've been marching to say we want free education. We've been tabling things that we want. We've been complaining about the manner in which TVET colleges are operating. We've been complaining about a whole number of things that are going wrong in the Higher Department of Education. But there's just no one that wants to come out to the table and say, I admit that I am failing at this department. Maybe Comrade Blade Nzimande is a very good comrade, but in another department, clearly, in this one, he's not doing his job.
I think the minister is quite correct. It's not the pass mark or pass rate. It's the 75% of the modules. But I must state it categorically that as the union, we did not accept such a proposal because we believe that NSFAS coming from 50%, which is the expectation previously, now to push it from 50% to 75% is quite huge. I mean, we need a staggered approach so that we can ensure that we adjust to those who are being funded by NSFAS.
You're watching Politics Unscripted, the segment of the show. It is the debate uncensored, and we are discussing the challenges that students find themselves in tertiary institutions. And one of the issues that seems to be coming out strongly is that NSFAS is simply failing students when it comes to giving monies or processing these monies so that they are able to get the requirements they need for them to advance in these institutions. And we are with Mandla Shikwambana. He is the EFF Student Command President. Sakile Mgadi is the Federal Deputy Chairperson of the DA's Students Organization, and Sizo Phila Mkhize is with the ANC Youth League and the National Task Team, that is. Let's pick up with you, Mr. Shikwambana. When it comes to this issue of funds being released on time, the kind of impact that students end up with, just give me a whole run of what exactly are the challenges that students confront when monies are not received on time.
Thank you very much. First, let's go to food allowances.
Yeah.
If there's no food, students are hungry. And when students are hungry, it means they will go to class hungry. And when they get to class hungry, they need to focus, they need to concentrate. No one can go to class that takes an hour or so. In an empty stomach, you still have your full attention to concentrate and get all what you are supposed to be getting from that particular lecture which you are actually receiving.
But someone could argue and say most of the classes, at least since 2020, have been conducted virtually, which means that students are at home, and if anything, you probably would be correct in arguing for equipment that will assist you in attending these classes. So
But
food may not necessarily arise as a strong point.
Koli, we are talking about black people here who are coming from poor families,
Yeah.
whom their parents are the working class. For that matter, their parents are farm workers. They don't even have food, even when they are at home. These NSFAS monies that which they are receiving, some of these students, if you know, Koli, they are even providing food at home with this little money that which they are receiving from NSFAS. When we speak that when they don't get this money, they get frustrated, it is because also they are also supporting their families. Even when they're at home, still there's no food at home because their parents are not working, because they are coming from poor families. So it doesn't matter whether you are at home or you are at school or what, the question still remains that you don't have food and you are going hungry at that point and you are expected to go to class. Fine, in that level, I'm done. Let's go to book allowances.
Yeah.
Book allowances get delayed. A student receives book allowances at November or October, and we're expected to perform very well. And when you come next year, a student got less than 75% of their modules, which is, actually going to be required as of 2022.
Yeah.
And now that student is going to be dropped off by this specific funding of NSFAS. And let me tell you something, in the universities or TVET colleges, we've got two types of students. One, there are those who are paying cash because their parents can afford to pay cash.
Okay.
There are these ones who are focusing or who are depending on NSFAS, which is ourselves. And now, if we are in class or I'm in a class with a student that is paying cash, and then that student gets 70% of their modules, I get 70% of the modules. Next year, when we come back, the one who's paying cash is able to go and continue with their studies. Me, who come from poor family, depending on NSFAS, I got 70% of my modules. I couldn't get 75% simply because I received my study materials late, simply because there's delays in all disbursement of allowances from NSFAS on its own.
Yeah.
Now I'm being excluded as a black child from the from accessing education. So we are saying this type of arrangements that with NSFAS is coming with is nonsensical, and we are not going to support it, and we're going to fight it because of one reason. My colleague here from Youth League, she mentioned that first let's agree why at the first place there's this thing we are talking about now today, NSFAS. NSFAS is not a merit bazaar. NSFAS is meant to at least close a gap and also cater for those who are coming from poor families who cannot access higher education, but they've passed to access higher education. So you cannot want to treat NSFAS as a merit bazaar, that which you get from DBS, you get from whatsoever. We don't care about those things because those ones they tag is their merit, but NSFAS is meant for our people. NSFAS is meant for what? Our, black people who are particularly suffering. What we are saying is that at least this government of ours, if they don't want to give us free education now, they still depend in this mess which we are having today of NSFAS. But then they must not come with issues that which are going to exclude us into accessing education going forward, because this is just a way of taking black people out of education.
Sakile Mgadi, earlier you said that excellence, striving for excellence cannot be a bad thing, but the issue of 75% of your modules being at least passed before you receive the next help from NSFAS, it is something that clearly is problematic. And I say this because the operations director at Universities South Africa, Linda Meyer, is quoted as agreeing that this benchmark to implement overnight is something that simply cannot be achieved. Yes, there's no problem with striving for excellence, but you've got to start from somewhere. Do you agree with those sentiments?
Well, absolutely, because like I mentioned, there's structural issues that currently exist. But Xoli, we just need to look at the numbers. The numbers that are out now regarding the general performance of students. I mean, there are 8,520 students that are NSFAS funded at traditional universities currently that have failed, and there's a staggering 88,000 within the TVET sector, which hasn't been talked about, that have failed, who are NSFAS funded just in 2020 alone. And so there clearly is a problem within the education system as it stands, and the model in which NSFAS has used to fund students. And it needs to also be put that, the 2021 budget had a shortfall of 8 billion, and the projected shortfall for NSFAS in the 2022 budget is sitting at 10 billion. So there's less money, more students, and a structural challenge within the administration of NSFAS in and of itself, which obviously is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
And what we said in the Democratic Alliance Student Organization was that the funding model of NSFAS needs to change, and Mandla is incorrect. It's not just NSFAS students and students who are self-payers. There's also what we know as the missing middle, which is generally a forgotten about area of individuals who can't necessarily afford, higher education, but don't qualify for NSFAS as it is.
Yeah.
Right?
Can I quickly follow up on what you are raising, which is a point I was going to come to later, but you've raised it now, so let's deal with it therefore. The question was going to be the general performance of students, particularly the ones who rely on NSFAS. Surely there should be a criteria by which they are assessed on to say you are then going to qualify for the next round of financing, but it's got somehow to be also premised around your performance. Yes, there are poverty issues that people are dealing with, and we cannot understate that, but you also cannot be throwing money into a pit hole where people are simply not performing. So what criteria should students be judged by, particularly when it comes to academic performance?
Yeah, so look, and this is where the structural issues come in, and that's why this is such a difficult issue, because essentially we aren't really now measuring the academic aptitude of students and their ability to achieve results on the back of having, no allowances, no accommodation, no food, and how those resources are pivotal in them achieving and, participating and actually getting those results. But at the end of the day, you're quite right, Oli, money is being put into the system, and the system needs to get results for that. And that's why, as the Democratic Alliance Student Organization, our policy that through our members of parliament within the portfolio of higher education have presented to both Minister Blade Nzimande and NSFAS was a, reworking of how NSFAS functions, where students who can afford, education through the income bracket at home pay, that the missing middle is catered for depending on the income you get proportionately, and students who fall under a special bracket of, unable to afford education are subsidized fully for their education. But this also needs to be a loan, because as you can see, there isn't money in the system, and the fiscus can't afford the current model that NSFAS is using. And so as the DA Students Organization, we did revert to them saying that the model that was previously used as loans, where you would then graduate as a student, hopefully find employment, and then pay the system back, was more sustainable. The current system isn't. And I think because it's not sustainable, we're seeing these problems that are structural developing, and that's affecting the performance of students as well. So absolutely, I think there needs to be a benchmark. I think the current benchmark is 50% of your modules. But also, we can't then just jump from 50 to 75 if it is an issue of, of striving for the excellence that I spoke about. Maybe an incremental increase or yearly incremental increase in the standards needs to be applied for it to be more, sustainable and also fair to students.
Okay.
So that's something that we've also engaged with the minister and NSFAS, and we're going to continue those engagements as the DA Students Organization.
All right. Ms. Mkhize, let's come to you. Clearly, this 75% benchmark for all your subjects, at least, to be passed, it comes from somewhere, or it has been prompted by something, and clearly it has its roots on the performance and perhaps the lack thereof. If people are failing, how in the world then should the system continue rewarding failure? Surely that can't be.
I agree with you. Under normal circumstances, it wouldn't be fine to keep on awarding people that are failing. But we're in an abnormal situation where an institution that takes money out, that is supposed to fund students, is dismally failing. I mean, there'll be a paper that says there's corruption in NSFAS, and no one would want to speak about it.
Okay, let's deal with corruption. Let's deal with corruption, because you've said it now a number of times.
Can I finish?
Yeah.
What needs to happen, and we are in no way speaking on behalf of students that are failing. We're striving for excellence. But what we're saying is that NSFAS needs to be fixed, and they cannot hide behind students that are failing. They need to fix and get their house in order. They need to make sure that students are well equipped for them to be able to get the 75% that they want, at least of all the modules that one will take. I mean, we're going to have a problem if we want to jump and shift the blame straight to students.
Yeah.
Straight to students who are vulnerable, students that are not getting the things, that are not getting equipment for them to be able to do this module, for them to be able to give this excellency that NSFAS wants. Maybe even them, those NSFAS people, must start seeing their academic records, because, wow.
Let's deal with the issue of corruption, because remember, you can't just claim corruption without basing it on anything. It's important here that people get given money in order not only to help them in their circumstances where they find themselves, but it is also the reason there is this 75% benchmark is so that they can perform, so that they can make something of their lives. So let's deal with corruption. What corruption do you know of that exists within NSFAS?
I'll make a typical example. There's a student that I know who studies in TUT, was funded by NSFAS for 2 years, comes back the next year, third year, comes back the third year, and in the system of NSFAS, there are no records that she was ever funded by NSFAS. There's an instance where students will get double allowances where they shouldn't be getting double allowances. And we do not hear about investigations to those things. We do not hear about any findings to those things. All we hear about is academically correct NSFAS board that wants to rise the benchmark to 75%, I mean from 50. It does not make sense. I'm a student, and I am academically admitted. The university says, you're okay. You have passed 50 plus, or you have passed 60, you can be at school. But now NSFAS is saying you can't be at school. When we're striving for excellence, it's very important that we don't leave anyone excluded, because now you're going to have a lot of young people that will drop out because they can't go to school. NSFAS that was funding them is no longer funding them. Mandla made a typical example of 70%. You go home, sit at home, be demobilized, just sit at home, you start doing drugs, and this thing will contribute to the social ills that we always talk about. Now, I do not think that whoever was sitting in that board, in that boardroom discussing and coming up with this proposal was sober.
Mandla, what corruption do you know of that seems to exist within NSFAS?
You know, Toli, there's a case of a student. Even now, is still in court. That student, I feel sorry for her, because someone decided alone in the office
that they were going to deposit.
That they are going to deposit money, and they double money. They pay millions into the account of that student, and now the students get tempted. Like, I mean, I've never had $1 million in my account. Like, even myself, if I can get that $1 million also by mistake, I will chow it. Not that I'm wrong, because I'm seeing numbers that I've never seen before in my account. And someone decided to sit in the office, or that type of an act. And where I'm sitting, in my mind it says, that money, it mistakenly went to this child, but it was not meant for that child. It was going to someone else who was going to perform this type of corruption that which they are actually doing. How many people that are mistakenly receiving these millions from NSFAS and we don't know about? If we can find one person having, and some of these students, it's not only the millions that of the students that we know from the, I think she's from
I think she's from the Eastern Cape, if I'm not
mistaken. Yes. Then now, there are some students who are receiving, instead of 1.5, they are receiving 15 5,000, those Molanyana monies, right?
All
and
right.
they are not being charged of that.
Okay.
Hence, I'm saying that there are people who are sitting in their offices there by NSFAS, doing their own things. Me now, what I'm thinking, if I would want to think in a corrupt manner like them, they will send money to me while we've got agreement with me. Then when that money is doubled, later I go. Because you know what they do, these people? There's a student one day, by mistake, at University of Venda, they send money to that student. When they send money to the students, they say to the students, they immediately call the student. But can you refund? Not that the students must go to the offices and someone calls straight, says, I'm from NSFAS. We can see your account has been what? It's been doubled by this much. Can you please, on this number, refund that money? And when we raise about these issues, no one listens to us.
Because we think the benchmark is too high to implement overnight. You can't go from 50% to 70% overnight. And specifically, to change the system by 2023 to do that, we would need an incremental approach and we would need programs to support students. This really is about the N+ rule. So the N+ is the minimum number of years that you get to complete a degree. So let's say it's 3 years. Currently, you get an N+1, which is an additional year that NSFAS funds the student. In the current proposal, it is the 75 plus an N+2, which means if you have 3 years to complete your qualification, NSFAS will fund you for an additional 2 years, so 5 years. Their argument is that they need a particular cap, for example, 75%, as an indication that a student will be able to complete the degree or the qualification within the specific time frame of the 5 years. And they cut in relation to the modules, so it means that 75% of the modules, as Lukanya pointed out, 75% of the modules that the student is enrolled for the particular year would then require a 50% pass mark to remain in the system.
Let's pick up on some of the words that were used there, and it was by the University's South Africa Operations Director there, Dr. Linda Meyer. Let's pick up with you, Mr. Mgadi, on some of the wording she used there, and that is, this needs to be incremental. So, as a way of getting to that 75%, perhaps we need to start from somewhere, but at least above the 50% benchmark, maybe 60, 65. Would that go some way in appeasing people who feel worried that if they don't reach this 75% of all their modules, or at least their modules being passed, then they're going to fall off the system? Would 60, 65 be a good starting point?
So I don't have the numbers with me that inform me to sort of endorse a 60 or a 65. But I think on principle, it can't be anything but incremental, right? So the jump from 50 to 75% is just, it's not something that can be supported. And I don't think that would be necessarily fair on students that are currently in the system. So on principle, I think increments of increase are fair. And then that will, allow students and prepare them in the years to come to ensure that they do abide by those criteria. But I think, Oli, and we tend to dilute the conversation and the debate today when we speak about NSFAS corruption and this and that. This is a structural issue, and we can even increase it to 75% and exclude thousands of young people in this country. But at the end of the day, if we aren't going to challenge, talk about, and address the structural issues within NSFAS as an institution, that 60-75% isn't going to achieve anything, because the system, the challenges within the system will still persist. And so we can talk about it, like I said, but at the end of the day, we need to revisit what NSFAS is about, why they are now centralized in Cape Town, and why they've been removed from campuses and campus offices, which I think is where a lot of the challenges and the problems started in the first place, and a lot of the other systemic issues. But I also want to say that there is a new CEO and there is a new board at NSFAS, and for the first time in, I think, a number of years, they received an unqualified audit from the Auditor General. So they are within that department seemingly moves to move into a good, performance-related trajectory.
Right.
However, the systemic challenges still persist, and those are what I think are needing, urgent attention.
All right, quick closing remarks. Ms. Mkhize, starting with you. There's a new CEO. Maybe it could be a signal of better management systems that may be put in place. Yes, no?
Well, maybe, but we don't really want to really believe that it's going to change, because people that are getting their hands in the cookie jar still in NSFAS are still within the NSFAS, and they're not charged. But we hope that because there's new leadership in place, probably they'll be able to hold those people accountable. First thing that must happen is that all student organizations, youth formations as well as South Africa, must unite and reject the 75%. That's the first. But the second also is to address the systematic challenges that exist within the higher institutions of learning, because I would not want to sit again like this in next year discussing another problem that has surfaced. I think we need to maybe just take off our political caps as young people, as students, take off our political caps and sit down and speak about things that are affecting us as young people, and see if we can't, because I do believe that the EFF might have a solution. ANC Youth League, SASCO, DASO, we all might have solutions. I mean, we're great minds, all of us. Let's unite and take this step forward, because there's no way that we can speak in different voices and hope for results that are going to benefit all of us when we speak in different voices.
A united voice is much stronger than a segmented one. Do you think that that's a good starting point, that you need to unite in order for you to get what you want as student representatives?
All students' organizations, I believe that they stand to give the students of South Africa a better leadership. But what I want to say from what my colleague is saying, uniting is not a problem. We can unite, all of us, like we did in 2015, if you remember. There was a united front of all students of South Africa in different political parties that we are having in the institutions of higher learning. Sure. But the problem comes in when you unite with people who are going to sell as going forward. Because there are those that when we are united on the streets, they go at night, go to the offices, they go and connive. And then we end up not achieving what we seek to achieve through the unity that we want to get.
You laugh the loudest.
So.
I actually agree. I do agree with her. I think there has been something that has been crippling us as young activists, of standing in a way of wanting to be always seen as this good person by the elders, whether elders of DA, of EFF, or of the ANC. And that thing needs to stop amongst ourselves, because we do not achieve the things that we want to achieve, because we're very quick in selling each other out. We're very quick to say, no, the person who was leading the march was Mandla. The person who came with an idea of marching to your offices was Mandla. It was not me. Hoping that you will probably receive some sum of money, you'll go back home with a bag of cash from the elders. I think it's time that young people do understand that for South Africa to rise and for South Africa to be great again, young leadership needs to take over. And it can only happen if we have similar minds.
As I conclude, when we are saying we've got all these problems today of fundings, basically for the students, the EFF Students Command is one of the organizations that speak openly about free education. If we have free education, this type of problems, we're not going to have them.
All right.
We are only having these problems because we are relying on NSFAS to give us free education, and NSFAS is not the vehicle to deliver free education to the black people of South Africa and all students of South Africa in majority.
To all of you, thank you very much for your time and indeed your contributions towards this discussion. Mandla Shikwambana, EFF Student Command President, Sakile Mgadi, joining us virtually is the Federal Deputy Chair of the DA's student organization, and last but not least, Sizopila Mkhize. She is with the Youth League, National Youth Task Team, the spokesperson there. Thank you very much for your time. All right.